He wasn't a judge. He wasn't a lawyer. He wasn't even human. But when everyone else questioned her story, he believed her. A German shepherd named Ranger, trained to detect danger, did something no one else could. He listened to a mother's fear and uncovered the truth. What started with a bark led to an arrest, a courtroom battle, and a second chance at life. This isn't just a story about justice. It's about an unexpected hero with 4 legs and a heart that saw what others refused to see. If you believe that God still speaks through love, faithfulness, and the things we least expect, watch this story to the end. And if your heart is touched, please comment Amen below this story. Please click the subscribe button so I have the motivation to send you more interesting stories. Thank you very much for that. The fluorescent lights buzzed low above the near-empty terminal of Denver International Airport. Outside, a late October wind howled across the concrete tarmac, sweeping dry leaves and dust from the Rockies into distant corners of the lot. Inside, the terminal was a cold echo chamber of rolling luggage wheels and overhead boarding calls. Night shift was never quiet for long, but for Customs Officer Logan Reeves, this moment of calm was a precious rarity. Logan stood tall in his regulation jacket, the cuffs slightly frayed from years of wear. At 37, he carried the silent weight of a man who had seen more than he ever wanted to talk about. A former Marine who spent 2 tours in the Middle East, Logan now worked security detail and customs inspections at one of the busiest airports in the country. His sharp jawline was half-shadowed by stubble. His pale blue eyes missed nothing. He walked with a slight limp, nothing obvious, but years in combat left its signature, both on his leg and deep in the corners of his mind. At his side, the real star of the shift was on alert. Ranger, a 4-year-old male German shepherd with a sable coat like burned gold and charcoal. Ranger's ears were always pricked, his eyes sharp, and his gait smooth like a shadow on patrol. He was large, muscular, but not heavy, and bore the kind of quiet intelligence that couldn't be trained. It was bred into his soul. What made Ranger different wasn't his nose, though it was exceptional. It was something deeper. The trainers once labeled him too reactive, too emotionally attuned, like he sensed more than just scent. Most handlers had passed on him. Logan had not. Logan and Ranger had been together for 18 months now, ever since that day in El Paso when a shivering, distrustful Ranger had been on the verge of being removed from the K-9 program. But Logan had looked into the dog's eyes and seen the same haunted focus he saw every morning in his own mirror. He had asked for a trial, and the rest was history. "Terminal G is almost done," Logan muttered, adjusting the K-9 unit vest on Ranger's body. The dog nudged forward without needing a command. Their communication didn't need words. Passengers from Flight 482 from Seoul were trickling in. Families mostly. Some tired businessmen. A young mother pushing a navy blue stroller with a baby wrapped in a thick blanket caught Logan's eye, not because of her appearance, but because of Ranger's sudden reaction. The shepherd stopped, tail stiff. A low growl vibrated through his chest, not loud, but unmistakable. Logan turned sharply. "Ranger, heel," he said quietly, but the dog didn't respond. Instead, he surged forward, stopping right in front of the stroller. The woman froze. She was in her late 20s, tall, with dark hair tied back in a low ponytail, and a weary look that went beyond jet lag. Her clothes were clean but wrinkled, hands gripping the stroller handle too tightly. Her skin was pale, with a faint flush across her cheeks, nerves. But she said nothing, only stared at Ranger with wide eyes. "Ma'am, I need you to step back, please," Logan said, calmly but firmly. The woman hesitated, then took one reluctant step as Ranger placed his front paws gently but firmly on the edge of the stroller. He didn't bark. He simply sniffed, then nudged at the blanket with his nose. The baby inside stirred and let out a tiny cry. And then something slid off the edge, a blue blanket. And beneath it, wedged under the infant's tiny feet and secured with padded cloth, a glint of metal. Logan's training kicked in. "Weapon under the infant," he barked into his radio. "Loaded Glock. Lockdown Protocol Alpha." Chaos bloomed in slow motion. Nearby passengers dropped to the floor. TSA officers rushed in. Ranger didn't move. He remained stationed by the stroller, calm as a statue, his eyes watching the woman as if daring her to make a wrong move. The woman didn't run. She just stood there, lips trembling, eyes not leaving her child. Once the Glock was retrieved, safety off, fully loaded, Logan stepped back, heart pounding. The Glock 19 had been taped beneath the stroller's cushion. It hadn't just slipped in. It was hidden. "I need her in holding room 3, said a voice from behind. Officer Marcus Green, one of the night supervisors. Marcus was a man in his 40s with a buzz cut and a heavy-set build. He was strict but fair, and currently looking at the Glock as if it had spit on the floor. Logan gave a brief nod and held Ranger back as officers gently moved the baby and the stroller to a separate area. The woman, Emily Carter, as her passport later revealed, was silent. She didn't argue. She didn't cry. She didn't resist. Back in the K9 unit break room 2 hours later, Logan sat with Ranger stretched out at his feet, calm now, as if the night hadn't just exploded around them. Logan rubbed between the dog's ears. "You felt something, huh?" he murmured. "Not the metal. Not just that. You smelled fear." He leaned back against the wall. That look in the woman's eyes. That stillness. That wasn't someone smuggling weapons for money. That was something else. Something darker. Something desperate. He looked down at Ranger, whose ears twitched at the sound of a nearby door closing. "You were thrown away once, boy." Just like she looked like she had been. And somewhere deep inside, Logan knew this wasn't over. Whatever had been hidden under that blanket wasn't the only thing buried beneath the surface tonight. Emily Carter sat across from Logan in interrogation room 3, her hands folded in her lap like a child waiting for punishment. The room was bathed in a cold fluorescent hue, the walls a pale gray that seemed designed to strip away any remaining sense of comfort. Her dark hair, now slightly frizzed from the hours of travel and stress, framed a face that was young but drawn. 28, Logan had read in her file. Yet she looked older in the dim light, not from wrinkles but from the heaviness in her eyes. Her olive skin was taut, and there was a bruise just beneath the collarbone, faint but real. She wore a light beige trench coat over jeans, the kind that looked like they hadn't been changed in 2 days. Her boots were practical, scuffed, worn at the heels. Logan sat on the opposite side of the steel table, arms folded, Ranger curled quietly at his feet. The German shepherd, ever alert, had chosen a spot between Emily and the door, his body low but his gaze unblinking. He hadn't barked, hadn't growled, hadn't moved since they'd brought her in. And that unsettled Logan more than if Ranger had lunged at her. He had seen his dog agitated, protective, even aggressive. But this stillness, it was different. Ranger wasn't guarding the door. He was watching the woman, waiting, like he was the one conducting the interview. Emily's voice, when she finally spoke, was soft, with a barely there lilt that suggested she hadn't used it much lately. "He's 3 months old. His name's Jacob. He hasn't slept well on planes. Is that why there was a gun taped under his feet?" Logan asked, his tone steady but not sharp. She looked down, inhaled, held her breath for too long, then exhaled slowly. "I didn't come here to hurt anyone." "Where are you coming from?" "Seoul." "Returning to the U.S.? No, a pause. "Passing through. I have family in Vancouver." "I was going there." "You're not Canadian." "No. American." "But it's not that simple." Her hands twitched in her lap, then stilled again. Her voice was almost robotic, like she was reciting a script, not telling a story. Logan studied her. Everything about her said exhausted. Not just physically, existentially. There was no defiance in her tone, no cunning glances or legal caution. Just fear. A familiar fear. Not of being caught, but of not being believed. The door clicked open behind Logan, and in stepped a new presence. Officer Dana Brooks, airport security, and liaison with the Child Services Division. Dana was in her early 40s, a solidly built woman with a kind face but sharp instincts. Her dark blonde hair was pulled into a tight ponytail, and her uniform sat neatly on her tall frame. She'd served 15 years in Family Protective Services before transferring to airport operations. She carried a folder and a look that said she had seen too many mothers like this one, and too few happy endings. I checked the child, Dana said quietly, glancing at Logan before turning her eyes to Emily. He's healthy, tired, a little dehydrated. No bruises, no marks, no signs of physical neglect. You packed powdered formula, extra diapers, 2 changes of clothes. You're a better planner than most first-time moms. Emily said nothing, just nodded once, barely visible. Dana sat beside Logan, laid the folder on the table. You want to talk to us, Ms. Carter? Because right now we have a firearm taped inside a stroller and an international travel path that makes no legal sense. It would help your case if we understood why. I didn't mean to break the law. She hesitated. But if I'd checked that stroller, someone would have found the weapon. And if they'd found it, they might have notified. She cut herself off. Logan leaned forward slightly. Notified who? Emily glanced at Ranger, then back at him. Someone who would have stopped me from getting away. Someone who would have taken him back. Dana's voice softened. Who, Emily? My husband, she said finally, and the name sat in the air like a shadow. He's not listed on Jacob's birth certificate. No one knows we're gone. Not yet. But he will find out. Logan exchanged a look with Dana. He could see the shift, Dana leaning in, not as interrogator but as witness. They had both seen victims walk in looking like criminals. The difference was always in the eyes. Emily cleared her throat, wiped her hand on her coat. I lived in Seoul for 4 years. Taught English, did freelance translation. That's where I met him. At first, he was charming. Too charming. Then controlling. Then dangerous. By the time I knew, I was already pregnant. He said he'd take Jacob, raise him alone, said I was unstable. That I didn't deserve to be a mother. Logan looked down at Ranger. The dog was still watching her, but now his tail thumped just once. And you brought the gun, because you were afraid he would find you? Yes. I know it was stupid. I know I'm going to be charged. But he has money, lawyers, connections. And I had no one. Just him. And now just my son. The silence that followed wasn't cold. It was thick with the weight of understanding. Dana finally spoke. Emily, you're not being charged yet. Not officially. We're detaining you, not arresting. That means there's still time to get ahead of this. But we need the truth. All of it. I gave up everything, Emily whispered. My passport says I'm traveling alone. Jacob's name isn't even on the boarding manifest. I used a friend's connections. A different name. That's why I didn't declare the gun. Because if I had, I wouldn't be here. She looked up, and for the first time, her voice had edge. Not anger, resolve. I'd rather be arrested than be found by him. Ranger stood, slowly, as if moved by something invisible. He walked around the table and sat at Emily's side. Not blocking her. Not guarding her. Sitting with her. Emily froze, but then her eyes softened. He knows. Logan's throat tightened, but he said nothing. Dana stood. I'll get social services to come in. But Logan, I think we need to escalate this. This isn't customs anymore. Logan nodded. I'll call DHS. And we'll need to secure whatever bags she brought. If there's more to this, we'll find it. As Dana left, Emily reached a tentative hand toward Ranger's head. He didn't flinch. She hesitated, then slowly placed her palm against his warm fur. I didn't think anyone would believe me, she said, almost to herself. But I think he did before I even said a word. Logan leaned back in his chair, looking between the woman and the dog. His mind was racing, not with procedures, not with reports, but with the way Ranger had reacted not to the weapon but to the woman. There was something in her he recognized too well. Not guilt, not deceit, just fear, and the stubborn hope that maybe, this time, someone would listen. The morning sky over Denver was slowly blooming with muted lavender and pale orange, but inside the administrative wing of the airport's Secure Customs Division, the air remained sterile and electric. Fluorescent lights continued to hum faintly, and the scent of machine-brewed coffee mixed with the sharp tang of metal filing cabinets and vinyl flooring. Logan Reeves sat in a windowless interview room, a government-issued laptop in front of him, the cursor blinking on an encrypted login screen. In his hand, he held a delicate gold chain, and at its center, disguised as a simple crucifix, was a micro USB stick, no larger than his pinky nail. The chain had come from Emily. She had unclasped it from around her neck with shaking fingers, eyes downcast, and handed it over without a word. Logan hadn't opened it right away. Something about the gesture felt ceremonial, loaded, as though the weight of years of silence now hung from that chain, begging to be heard. He exhaled through his nose and slotted the USB into the port. Ranger lay at his feet, unusually still. The 4-year-old German shepherd hadn't shifted from his place since they entered the room. He was curled tightly near Logan's boots, his head resting between his paws, but his eyes followed every movement. The moment the USB activated, Logan felt Ranger lift his head slightly, ears twitching, not in alert, but in awareness. As if even the dog knew this was no ordinary file. The screen lit up with folders, videos, medical_records, legal, and audio. Logan clicked on videos first. The grainy footage began to play. A living room, dimly lit. A man, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing an expensive button-down, shoved Emily hard against the wall. She didn't scream, didn't cry out. The only sound was the whimpering of a baby from another room. The camera had clearly been hidden, angled from behind a shelf or a television. Logan watched, jaw tightening, as the man turned away and Emily sank to the floor. The folder held dozens more clips, each dated, each chronicling variations of the same nightmare. The same man, the same silence. Emily was never the one yelling. She was always enduring. The name Robert Kane appeared in an insurance document Logan opened next. Kane. Logan recognized it instantly. A public figure in the private security industry, Robert Kane was the CEO of Kane Risk Management, one of the largest private security firms in the western United States. On paper, he had a clean record, a sterling business reputation, and a polished public image. But Logan knew too well that power, when combined with charm and immunity, often left its dirtiest work in places no spotlight ever reached. A knock on the door broke his concentration. It opened to reveal Dana Brooks, holding a baby in one arm and a manila folder in the other. Her uniform was slightly wrinkled, a coffee stain on the shoulder of her shirt, and her ponytail had started to loosen from the night's long hours. Yet she looked composed as always, the lines around her eyes deeper today, but calm. "Jacob's asleep," Dana said softly as she stepped in. "He took formula finally. I think his system just needed rest. He's underweight for his age, but nothing critical. No bruises, no rashes, no lice. Clean clothes, proper formula. Whatever else she is, Emily's a mother who planned for survival." Logan nodded, his attention still flickering between the monitor and the chain now coiled on the desk. Dana placed the folder on the table and leaned in slightly, glancing at the screen. Her brows knitted as she saw a paused frame of Robert Kane standing over Emily. "That him?" "Kane," Logan confirmed. "He's got a clean sheet, but she wasn't lying. This USB videos, medical scans, legal filings that were ignored, police reports that went nowhere. There's a record of a 911 call placed from her sole apartment. Police arrived. No charges were filed. But her wrist was broken. The ER documents are here." Dana exhaled slowly, sat across from him. How'd he get away with it all? Logan clicked into the audio folder and played a file labeled RC_call_march. The voice was unmistakably Kane's, deep, confident, edged with derision. "They won't believe her," he said on the recording. "She's 4 and unstable. I've got video of her yelling once when the baby wouldn't sleep. You think a judge won't eat that up? Trust me, I've done this before." Dana's expression didn't change, but her knuckles whitened around the edge of the chair. "We need to move this up the chain. FBI liaison. DHS. Maybe even a domestic violence specialist. We can't release her," Logan said. "Not yet. But we can't treat her like a smuggler, either. She was running with her baby, hiding a weapon as her only shield. It wasn't smart, but it wasn't malicious." Dana opened her manila folder. "There's something else. When we scanned her luggage, Ranger reacted again, not to the bag itself, but something on the bottom. We found a second compartment, clothes for the baby, Sure, but also prepaid phone cards, a South Korean passport under a false name, and a burner phone with only 3 numbers stored. All inactive now. Logan raised a brow. She wasn't just running. She was disappearing. Trying to, Dana agreed. And if she hadn't ended up at this airport, if Ranger hadn't caught that Glock, they both looked down. Ranger was sitting now, tail still, eyes watching Logan. Waiting again. He's more than just scent trained, Dana murmured. Isn't he? Yeah, Logan said quietly. He reads fear like a second language. They sat in silence for a while, watching the blinking cursor as the last video played on mute. Emily packing a diaper bag in secret, Robert shouting in the background, barely visible through the doorway. She paused mid-folding, touching her stomach, breathing deeply like she was trying not to cry. We need to bring her back in, Logan finally said. I don't think she gave us that USB just to prove her innocence. She gave it to us because she doesn't expect to make it much further. Dana stood, gathering her folder and baby blanket. Then let's make sure she does. It was just past 2 a.m. when Emily Carter sat down again, this time in a quieter room. The previous interview room had felt too clinical, too sharp, but this one, still stark, had softer lighting and a slightly padded bench beneath her. The overhead air vent rattled gently. The walls had no windows, no clocks, no mirrors, just 4 pale surfaces and the weight of everything she had run from. Her brown eyes looked hollow from sleep deprivation, but not empty. If anything, they burned more now. Jacob had finally fallen asleep in a temporary crib stationed in the infirmary just down the hall, and Dana Brooks, steady as ever, was watching over him. Emily had removed her coat, revealing a faded sweatshirt and jeans that no longer fit right since the baby. Her movements were slow, but no longer hesitant. What had started as trembling silence was now ready to turn into words. Logan Reeves stepped inside with a stainless steel thermos in one hand. Hot water and lemon, he offered. She accepted without speaking, holding it in both hands like a barrier between her and whatever came next. You don't have to explain anything, Logan said. But if you do, I'll listen. Emily's first word was almost a whisper. I did everything they told me to. Her voice had no tears left. She didn't blink much either. When it started, I didn't believe it myself. It wasn't fists, not at first. It was silence, gaslighting, watching me moving my things, rewriting the timeline of our arguments, so he always came out looking like the calm one. She sipped the hot water. Then the first time he shoved me, I apologized. Logan didn't move. Ranger, curled nearby, lifted his head. I went to the police twice in Seoul. Once with a bruised wrist, once with a doctor's note from when I fainted after he locked me out overnight. The officers were polite. Wrote things down. Said I should file through the embassy. She shook her head. He used to work for military contractors overseas. He had friends. He still has them. Her fingers tightened around the thermos. The night I decided to leave, he'd just come back from a business trip. He saw I'd changed the passcode on my phone. He didn't speak to me for 2 days. Then he threatened to take Jacob back to the States without me. Said no court would believe a foreign-born woman with no family and no money. Logan interrupted gently. But you are American. She nodded. But I'd been gone too long. No recent tax return. No address. I looked like I'd abandoned my life. In Canada? I have an old friend there. She runs a shelter for women. I didn't tell her everything. I just said I needed help. She agreed. Sent me an address, a contact. I had to make the flight through Denver. It was supposed to be a few hours. Lay low. Then connect. You packed the gun? I didn't plan to. It wasn't even mine. It was his. I found it in a drawer behind old documents. It terrified me. But I thought, if I'm found, if someone grabs us, I need something. I thought he'd never suspect I'd hide it under the baby. There was a silence between them, not hostile, just full. You're not the first person I've seen run like this, Logan said quietly. But you're one of the few who made it this far without hurting anyone. That says something. Just then, Ranger let out a low growl, sharp, not aggressive, but instinctual. Logan stood immediately. What is it? Emily whispered. Logan opened the door and Ranger rushed out into the corridor, nose low to the floor. The hallway was empty save for a single rolling cart of janitorial supplies and a few overhead lights buzzing softly. Ranger turned left, then halted in front of a blue nylon duffel bag slouched against the wall just outside the nearby conference room. That bag hadn't been there 20 minutes ago. Logan approached, eyes narrowing. Facilities on lockdown. Who the hell left luggage here? He bent beside it cautiously as Ranger circled, ears forward. There was no ticking, no smell of fuel, but something electronic. He opened the zipper slowly. Inside, wrapped in bubble wrap and duct tape, was a tracking device, commercial grade but advanced. GPS enabled. Cell tower triangulation fallback. It had been active. The display screen still blinked. Ranger whined low. Logan turned the device over. No name. But beneath a strip of masking tape were two words etched into the black plastic shell. Kane Intel. He snapped upright, adrenaline surging. Robert Kane had found them, or was closing in. Someone had dropped the bag close to the interview room. Someone inside the building. He called dispatch. Logan Reeves, badge 227B. I need internal camera logs reviewed for hallway 3A near interview room C. Unattended item was just located, suspected tracker. Priority. He turned back, found Emily in the hallway, pale and frozen. What is it? She asked, though she already knew. He's looking for you. And he's close. The air in the administrative wing had grown heavier with each passing hour. Though the outside world was beginning to glow with the early pink hues of dawn, inside the corridors of Denver International's Secure Customs Division, time felt suspended. Logan Reeves sat on a worn leather bench just outside the holding room. Ranger lay beside him, ears twitching, but his body unnaturally still. He hadn't budged from his post since the tracker was discovered. Something in him resisted leaving the door unguarded, like instinct whispered that danger was no longer a question of if, but when. Logan's eyes were red from strain and lack of sleep. His phone buzzed with updates. Internal footage was being scrubbed, and the name, Kane Intel, had triggered multiple red flags in the Department of Homeland Security's contractor registry. The bag, it turned out, had been placed just minutes before Ranger found it, but none of the cameras caught a clear image of the person, only a silhouette. Hooded, deliberate, smooth. Ranger had refused to eat since. Logan reached down, running a calloused hand across the German shepherd's thick sable fur. Ranger closed his eyes briefly, but didn't relax. His tension mirrored Logan's. For the past year, Logan had come to rely on Ranger for his sharp instincts and uncanny sensitivity, not just to scent, but to emotional shifts. Tonight, though, Ranger wasn't reacting to any single trigger. He was waiting for something only he could sense. Reeves. The voice came from behind him. Dana Brooks stood in the hallway, her arms crossed. Her uniform had been swapped for a gray airport-issued zip-up and navy slacks, a rare sign she'd allowed herself to rest, even for a moment. But the tightness around her eyes hadn't softened. Her blonde hair was messier than usual, and she carried a manila file thick with paper. She's asleep, Dana said softly. Finally, I stayed in the room until her breathing evened out. She clutched Jacob the whole time. Logan nodded, staring straight ahead. She's going to wake up to a war. Dana sat beside him with a sigh. That tracker wasn't just a threat. It was a message. Logan didn't answer right away. He was looking past the corridor into memory. Dana noticed it in his posture, the tilt of his shoulders, the faraway gaze. She didn't interrupt. I had a sister, Logan finally said, his voice low and rough. Claire. 5 years younger than me. Smart. Funny as hell. She married her college boyfriend, guy from a good family. Took him almost a year to isolate her. Dana remained still. She called me once, said he hit her. Said it only happened once, and that she was fine. I offered to drive to her place. She told me not to. Said she was scared of making things worse. That if he knew she told me, it'd be worse. He clenched his jaw. 2 weeks later, she was in the ER with a broken jaw and a concussion. She still didn't press charges. Said she slipped. I tried to intervene, Called the police once when I showed up and heard them yelling inside. But without her pressing charges, they couldn't do much. 6 months later, she was dead. Pushed down the stairs. Dana exhaled slowly, the kind of breath people took when grief became a shared space. The official report said it was an accident. Lack of evidence. Insufficient witness testimony. You know the drill, Logan added. I do, Dana replied. Too well. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Ranger stirred, lifted his head, and stared straight at the hallway door. His body tensed again, tail stiff, muscles locked. Logan followed the dog's gaze. The door to the main processing room was still shut. But something was off. Ranger's entire body now hovered just above the ground, every nerve in him attuned to something that hadn't arrived yet. Dana noticed it too. Is he reacting to movement? No, Logan said. He's reacting to silence. He stood up slowly, every inch of him wound tight. Let's run the rest of that USB. I've got a feeling there's more we haven't seen. Inside the security office, Logan plugged the chain drive back into the laptop. Dana leaned over his shoulder as he opened a subfolder they'd skipped before, legal_documents. Inside were scans of emails, notarized letters, and encrypted PDFs. One document stood out, a scanned affidavit from a former detective in Tacoma, Washington. The name was redacted, but the content was damning. A formal statement indicating that Robert Kane had donated $30,000 to a precinct fund just days before domestic abuse charges against him were dropped. Another file included emails between Kane's legal team and a retired psychiatrist discussing how to fabricate a psychological profile on Emily, portraying her as volatile, paranoid, and emotionally unstable. The plan was clear: strip her of credibility, then strip her of Jacob. Logan scrolled slowly, the pressure in his chest mounting. He planned every step. Dana's eyes narrowed. He didn't just manipulate the system. He built a paper trail to make sure no one could question it. A sudden knock on the door pulled them both from the screen. Agent Clint Myers stood on the threshold. Myers was a federal liaison, mid-50s, buzz-cut, tall and lean with a pinched mouth and salt and pepper goatee. Always in a dark suit, always with a voice like gravel. A former Army MP turned DHS investigator, Myers had the presence of a man who didn't waste breath. Just got flagged, Myers said without preamble. Kane booked a private jet to Colorado Springs. Landed an hour ago. There's no public itinerary, but he's here. Logan stood so fast the chair behind him rolled. He's not stupid, Myers added. He won't come near a federal facility. But if he's here, someone inside might already be helping him. Dana straightened. Then we lock this place down. No external comms. No access to Emily without escort. Myers handed Logan a flash drive. You'll want this. Kane's company, Kane Intel. We just got DHS approval to open their internal database. You're going to want to see what's in there. Logan didn't hesitate. Let's get to it. Behind them, Ranger stood at the threshold. He didn't bark. He didn't move. He just stared down the corridor, waiting again. Because something was coming. By mid-morning, the Denver sky was streaked with high-altitude clouds and pale winter light. Inside the secured conference room at the airport's Federal Processing Wing, the temperature felt colder than the frost outside. Logan Reeves stood at the far end of the table, flanked by Agent Clint Myers and Dana Brooks, both alert and drained, as if the hours of adrenaline had hardened into something heavier. The walls were soundproofed, the door double-locked, and the entire system had just been taken off the external grid. Emily Carter sat at the table, clutching a fresh mug of black tea. Her face was tired but upright, no longer hiding behind sleeves or shadows. Her hair was pulled back now, neat, and there was a quietness about her that wasn't fear, it was readiness. Her son, Jacob, was sleeping in an adjoining room under the supervision of a newly assigned protective services agent. Rosa Delgado, a petite, 50-something woman with short silver curls and the demeanor of a retired librarian. Rosa had spent 20 years managing foster placements for high-risk infants and had developed an uncanny ability to calm even the most distressed child. She was quiet, efficient, and entirely unshakable. Logan began. We've passed all your evidence to DHS and the federal prosecutor's office. Between the videos, audio files, medical records, and the internal memos from Kane Intel, the case has escalated. Myers, standing with his arms crossed, added, Robert Kane is now under preliminary investigation for obstruction of justice, domestic abuse, falsification of medical records, and conspiracy to manipulate legal custody. His travel activity and financials are being subpoenaed as we speak. Emily looked down. Does that mean he'll be arrested? Not yet, Myers said, but an emergency protective order has been filed and approved. Effective immediately, Robert Kane is restricted from coming within 500 feet of you or your son. His company has also been placed under federal review. Dana stepped forward, holding a signed court packet. This is the order. It's been sent to every local enforcement agency in Colorado and flagged nationally. If he breaches it, he goes to jail. No vai. Emily ran a thumb over the edges of the packet, as if not quite believing it was real. But don't mistake this for safety, Myers warned. Kane doesn't play by normal rules. You're protected, but we're not assuming he'll follow the law. At that moment, Logan's phone buzzed. He pulled it from his belt, glancing at the secure alert flashing across the screen. Unauthorized access, attempt internal terminal network location. Gate security node D, 41. His blood ran cold. I need to check something, Logan muttered, already moving toward the operations room. Ranger, who had been sitting in the corner of the conference room like a statue, immediately rose and followed without a sound. Inside the operations hub, Logan sat at the primary terminal and began pulling system logs. The entire airport's internal flight and personnel databases had been under heightened surveillance for hours, but something still got through. One entry blinked red on the screen. A backdoor login attempt into the airline passenger manifest. Emily's name had been accessed. Just once. Masked IP. Logged 10 minutes ago. Dana appeared behind him. Don't tell me. He's looking for her. Not where she is now, but where she was, Logan replied. Cross-referencing departure histories, tracking names through the back end. Ranger moved to the far wall and suddenly froze. The fur down his spine bristled. He took 2 deliberate steps toward the metal server rack in the corner and let out a sharp bark. Logan followed him, knelt down, and saw it. A USB splitter plugged in where no one had noticed it before. Disguised to look like part of the server's diagnostic tool set, the device was pulsing faintly. Jesus, Logan breathed. He's not just tracking her. Someone inside gave him a tunnel into our systems. Dana Kurst. I'll alert Tech Ops and pull every employee's ID logs. We've got a breach. Logan yanked the device from the rack and wrapped it in a sterile bag. Ranger found this before I even did a scan. He knew something was wrong. He always does, Dana murmured, watching the dog, who was still standing alert, ears pointed at the sealed server compartment. They returned to the conference room with the update. Myers grimaced. Then we're no longer just protecting a witness. This is an active national security breach tied to private intelligence operations. Emily blinked slowly, the weight of it sinking in. What happens now? She asked. Myers didn't sugarcoat. We relocate you. Under government watch. Temporary safe house, restricted access. We'll move you and Jacob under alias identities, supervised visits, scheduled medical care, and federal support. Kane will likely go quiet, but that doesn't mean he'll back down. Emily didn't flinch. Then we don't stop either. For the first time, Logan saw it clearly, the shift. She wasn't just running anymore. She was fighting back. Dana placed a hand gently on Emily's shoulder. You don't have to do it alone. As the team began organizing transport protocols, Ranger lay near the entrance, his eyes on the hallway like a sentry made of muscle and instinct. No one could explain how he had found the breach device. But Logan wasn't surprised. He had long stopped questioning the ways Ranger detected fear, corruption, and threat like a scent only he could recognize. He leaned down beside him, scratching under his collar. You did it again, didn't you, boy? Ranger licked his palm once, and then returned to his post. 3 months passed like wind over broken ground. Denver had shed its brittle winter, and stepped into a hesitant spring. The city bloomed in patches, early daffodils in sidewalk cracks, new mothers pushing strollers under leafless trees, and sky after sky the color of steel before rain. But inside the federal courthouse on Spear Boulevard, nothing was blooming. It was cold, quiet, and grave. Logan Reeves stood at the back of the courtroom in plain clothes, arms folded tightly across his chest. He wasn't wearing his uniform today. Neither was Ranger, who sat beside him, ears alert, his K9 vest removed at Logan's request. He didn't want the ceremony. He just wanted to be here, not for justice in the legal sense, but for Emily, for Jacob, and maybe even for Claire, his sister, who had never made it to a courtroom at all. The judge presiding was Eleanor Marston, a woman in her late 50s with streaks of silver woven through her tightly pinned bun. Her eyes were sharp, her posture regal, and her patience famously thin. She was known in Colorado's legal circuits as the Quiet Fire. Not for her tone, always even, but for her rulings, which had been described by colleagues as merciless to liars and a sanctuary for the broken. Across from her sat Robert Kane, dressed in a dark gray suit and crisp white shirt. He looked composed, his hair slicked back with arrogant precision, hands folded neatly. But the bags under his eyes, the way his jaw pulsed every few seconds, betrayed a mind losing control of its image. His defense team consisted of two high-priced attorneys, both polished, both hollow-eyed after a week of motions and damage control. Emily Carter sat at the witness stand, her back straight and her voice steady. She wore a dark navy dress that matched the calm in her gaze. Her hair was tied neatly, and though she looked thinner than before, she no longer looked hunted. She was surrounded by advocates from the shelter program, including Mira Sanchez, a community liaison with warm brown eyes and a soft-spoken but steel-like presence. Mira had been Emily's advocate in court preparation, a woman who had once fled her own abuser and now helped others find the strength to speak in rooms like this. Today, Emily had spoken, and when she did, the entire courtroom fell still. She didn't cry. She didn't raise her voice. But she told everything, from Seoul to Denver, from silence to survival. The room shifted as she spoke, not in noise, but in understanding. One of Kane's lawyers attempted to object mid-testimony, citing hearsay. Judge Marston shut it down with a single raised hand. Before Emily stepped down, she glanced at Logan and Ranger in the gallery. Her lips moved, barely visible, but Logan understood the words. "Thank you." That alone made the ache in his chest worth carrying. Later, the prosecution introduced the rest of the evidence. The USB drive, the internal memos, the hacked server data. But what broke the final wall was the testimony of Julie Kramer, a former assistant at Kane Intel. She was in her early 30s, blonde, thin, with the eyes of someone who had spent too long being invisible. Julie confessed to shredding documents, hiding payments, falsifying appointment records, all under Kane's orders. She had come forward after reading about the case online and learning that Jacob was just a baby. "I thought, if he'd do it to a woman he claimed to love, he'd do worse to a child," she said, her voice trembling. Her words burned through the room like a soft bomb. When Judge Marston finally banged her gavel that day, the ruling was clear. Robert Kane would be held without bail on multiple felony charges, pending formal indictment and criminal trial. He was led from the courtroom in handcuffs, his mask of composure finally broken. Outside the courthouse, a few reporters loitered, held back by a cordon of marshals. Emily didn't stop for interviews. She left through the side exit with Mira and Jacob, who now had full temporary custody awarded to his mother, pending final approval and continued participation in recovery support programs. The restraining order was extended indefinitely. That evening, at the Denver Police Department's annual K9 Valor ceremony, Ranger sat in the center of a circular stage. Cameras flashed as a local anchor read his citation. For actions above and beyond the call of duty, for detecting a concealed weapon, identifying a tracking breach, and protecting 2 lives from imminent harm, K9 Officer Ranger is awarded the Gold Shield of Valor. The crowd applauded, but Logan didn't join them on stage. When offered the microphone to speak, he only said, "This isn't my moment. The kid we saved, that's the only reward I need. In the back of the auditorium, Dana Brooks and Rosa Delgado exchanged smiles. Rosa held Jacob on her hip, the toddler giggling at the commotion. Emily stood beside them, her hand resting gently on her son's back, her eyes glistening but not crying. After the ceremony, Logan walked Ranger out the back door into the parking lot. The sky was clear, stars faint through the haze of street lamps. He knelt beside Ranger, hands resting on the dog's shoulders. "You were right about her from the start," he whispered. "You always know." Ranger licked his face once, then sat beside him, eyes watching the door like he expected someone else might need saving next. The morning sun filtered gently through the cottonwood trees lining the narrow gravel road that curved up toward a modest single-story home nestled in the quiet hills of Boulder, Colorado. Wildflowers had begun to bloom along the porch edge, and a wooden wind chime danced lazily in the breeze, its melody light and unhurried. The air smelled faintly of pine and warm earth, Colorado at its gentlest. Logan Reeves parked his dark SUV by the front gate, the dust settling behind him like a breath exhaled. He stepped out, adjusting the collar of his flannel shirt, the same one he'd worn on the night Ranger found the USB device in the server room. Washed now, but still holding a kind of gravity. He didn't often visit people after cases ended. But this one was different. This one had never really ended. Beside him, Ranger hopped out with ease. The German Shepherd's coat gleamed in the sunlight, his movements fluid and confident. At 5 years old now, he bore the calm maturity of a dog who had seen too much, given too much, and asked for little in return. His ears perked the moment the front door opened. The screen door creaked and a child's voice erupted, clear and delighted. "RRA!" Little Jacob, now nearly 2, came charging down the front steps in a burst of baby energy, his tiny arms flailing, his feet unsteady but determined. He wore a blue t-shirt with cartoon dogs on it, and one sock had slid halfway off. His dark curls bounced with every step, and his wide, almond-shaped eyes were filled with pure joy. "Hey, buddy," Logan said with a rare smile, stepping back slightly as Ranger moved forward to meet the child. Jacob threw his arms around Ranger's thick neck with no hesitation. The dog stood still, patient and warm, allowing the toddler to collapse against his side like a worn teddy bear. Then, ever so gently, Ranger dipped his head and nuzzled Jacob's hair. Emily stepped onto the porch with a soft laugh that drifted on the wind. She wore a simple white blouse and faded jeans, her hair longer now, tied loosely at the nape. Her face had changed. There was still a softness to her features, but it was no longer tinged with fear. Instead, it held something steadier. Peace, perhaps, or maybe just the permission to breathe. Her mother, Marion Carter, appeared in the doorway behind her. Marion was in her late 60s, short and strong-boned with silver-streaked chestnut hair, and the gentle sternness of someone who had spent decades teaching second grade. Her presence brought calm to the house, firm but loving, meticulous about folded towels and evening tea. Emily's father, Walter, didn't speak much, but he often lingered near the kitchen window, watching quietly with a carpenter's stillness and deep-set eyes that saw more than he said. "Logan," Emily called with a smile. "Come on in. He's been asking about RRA every morning this week." Logan walked slowly up the path, pausing by the porch steps as Ranger finally broke from Jacob to sit beside him. "He doesn't forget the important people," Logan said, glancing down at his partner. "Neither do I." They sat under the awning later, sipping iced tea and listening to the sound of Jacob's giggles from the garden, where Marion chased him through the flowers. Walter worked silently on a broken wind chime nearby, the occasional clink of metal adding to the harmony. Emily leaned back in the wicker chair beside Logan, her voice quieter now. "You know, I've been thinking about getting a dog. A trained one. Maybe from one of those therapy programs for trauma survivors." She smiled at the thought. "Not for Jacob, really, for me. I still get those silences at night, when everything's too still, and I think maybe the door will open again." Logan nodded, but didn't interrupt. "I just want to feel like someone's there, you know, even if it's not a person." Ranger, as if understanding his cue, rose from his place and padded over to Emily. He paused, then slowly rested his head against her leg, leaning in with the full weight of his presence. Emily let out a soft, surprised laugh, her hand automatically stroking behind his ears. "I guess that's a yes." Logan watched her for a long moment, then said, "Sometimes justice doesn't show up in courtrooms. Sometimes it's not about punishments or headlines. It's about this, about being brave enough to build something new after everything fell apart." He paused, nodding toward Ranger. "And sometimes it comes in the shape of a dog who sees through every mask you wear, and waits anyway." Emily looked down at Ranger, whose eyes met hers with that steady, knowing calm. "I think he knew I wasn't done healing," she whispered. "You're not," Logan said gently. "But you're not alone either." They didn't say much after that. They didn't have to. The wind picked up slightly, stirring the chimes overhead. Logan rose after a while, brushing dust from his jeans, Ranger falling into step beside him. "Will you come back?" Emily asked, standing as well. Logan tilted his head. "If you've got tea, we'll find a reason." As they walked back down the gravel path, Jacob shouted from the flower bed, "Bayara," waving a dandelion like a flag. Ranger turned his head and wagged his tail once, just once. But somehow that was enough. Sometimes the miracles we wait for don't arrive in thunder or fire. They come in silence, in the shape of a loyal dog, a quiet act of courage, or a mother who refuses to give up. Emily's journey reminds us that faith isn't always about what we see, but about what we continue to believe even when the world goes dark. And sometimes God sends us angels not with wings, but with paws and a gentle heart. If you've ever doubted your strength or felt like no one was listening, remember this: healing is holy. Protecting your child, your truth, your peace, that is divine work. God doesn't abandon the broken. He walks beside them, and sometimes He sends a dog to lead the way. So if this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs hope. Leave a comment, and let us know what you believe was the turning point. Type Amen if you believe that God still moves in quiet ways. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories of love, healing, and second chances. May God bless you and those you hold dear.